Now we're looking at quadratic equations. So we're going to look at number 18 and 19 in this video. In number 18, we're asked to solve each equation by factoring. So when you solve by factoring, the important thing is that you start by setting it equal to 0. So you always want to do that first. So for this problem, I'm going to move these terms over. I like my squared term to be positive. So I'm going to move everything to this side, and remember, if I change sides, I change signs. So my first step is to look for a GCF. It looks like I can factor out a 2. And remember, this is an equation, so we want to keep putting it equal to 0 as we go. So now I'm going to factor that trinomial. It looks like it's going to factor into 3 and 6, and everything's positive. Now at this point, I have the product of 3 things equal to 0. And that's true if any factor is equal to 0. So I can't have 2 equal to 0. That's impossible. So that doesn't give me a solution. But if x plus 3 is equal to 0 or x plus 6 is equal to 0, then when I multiply them, the whole thing would be equal to 0. So I get an answer of x equals -3 and x equals -6. So we always want to list our 2 solutions. I don't care what order you put them in, but make sure you list them both. All right, so let's try the same thing for b. Now it's already equal to 0, so that's done for me. And I don't have a GCF, so I'm going to do factoring by grouping. I'm thinking -15, right, for my outside number, and -2. So I'm looking for numbers that multiply to make -15 and add to make -2. So 5 and 3, if I make the 5 negative and the 3 positive. So I'm going to do factoring by grouping. This tells me how to split my middle term. I'm going to put the 3 first because I'm already seeing that 3x squared, and I kind of want those 3's together. All right, so just a review on factoring. Remember, I'm getting these numbers from right here, but I know when I combine them, they'll go back to be that -2x. And remember, this whole thing is equal to 0. So I'm going to factor out a 3x. Then I'm going to factor out a -5. And I want those parentheses to match, and I get x plus 1 times 3x minus 5 equals 0. Now at this point it is factored, but it is not solved. So factoring is a tool, but it's not the end result. So now I'm going to set each factor equal to 0. And I get x equals -1. I get 3x equals 5. Or x equals 5/3. So generally we get 2 answers with these. Every once in a while both answers will come out to be the same, but we do expect with a quadratic 2 answers. All right, so let's look at square root property. Square root property is really nice when you're missing an x term. So in this case I have x squared equals 8. So what I do with square root property is I isolate the square root, which is already done for me on A, and then I'm going to take the square root of both sides. Now remember, the square root symbol stands for the principal or positive square root. So we want to make sure we also get the other square root. So we want to include a plus and a minus. So the square root and the square cancel, and I get x equals plus or minus the square root of 8. Now 8 breaks down into 2 times 2 times 2. So we can pull out a group of 2's, but it's going to go right here. Right? So we don't want to put it in front of the plus or minus. We want to put it right before the square root. So we get plus or minus 2 square roots of 2. So if I write out both answers, I have -2 times the square root of 2 and +2 times the square root of 2. Now b's a little different. I'm not seeing just an x squared, but I do have something in parentheses squared, so I could take the square root of that and get that square to cancel. And I'm going to do that on the other side as well, but on that side I need a plus and minus. So the square root and the square cancel, and I get x plus 5 equals plus or minus, but the square root of 16 is just 4. So I want to break this into two equations. I have x plus 5 equals negative 4, and I have x plus 5 equals positive 4. So I'm getting that from that plus and minus right there. Okay, so I'm going to minus 5 to both sides. I get x equals negative 9. And I get x equals negative 1. Okay, so my two answers are negative 9 and negative 1. So that shows two of our quicker methods for solving quadratics. Factoring is always a good method, but not everything factors. Square root method is great if you have something squared but no x term by itself.